Hello everyone, welcome once again to another interesting discussion on biology. To receive notification of new biology videos, please subscribe and hit the bell button below. Share, like and subscribe. In this video, we'll be discussing a topic from Form 5, Chapter 1, Transport in Plants. The mechanism of stomatal opening and closing. We'll be studying how guard cells become turgid when they are exposed to sunlight and how they open the stomatal pore. And also what happens in darkness to these guard cells that make them close the stomatal pore. What is a stoma? A stoma is a small pore on the upper and lower epidermis of the leaf, mostly on the lower surface or the undersurface, to reduce transpiration. So imagine this is the under surface of the leaf, not the upper surface, but the lower surface. On the lower surface, there are many stoma. The upper surface also has some stoma, but less. The reason why more stomata is found on the lower surface is so that the rate of transpiration or water loss from the plant will be reduced to prevent dehydration of the plant. Okay, so a stoma is the singular form, and when we have many of these stoma, we say stomata. We call them stomata. So these two actually mean the same thing. What is the function of a stoma? So a stoma is very important to the plant because it allows a few gases to diffuse in and out of it, and also water. For example, carbon dioxide will diffuse into the leaf when the stoma is opened in the daytime, so that it can be used for the process of photosynthesis in the palisade mesophyll cells and the spongy mesophyll cells. If the stoma is closed, there is no carbon dioxide coming in, and the plant will not be able to photosynthesize. Secondly, oxygen may be produced during photosynthesis, and if this is in excess, it will diffuse out of the stoma during the daytime. Or if it is needed for respiration, then oxygen may have to diffuse in through the stoma for respiration when there is a lack of oxygen in the plant. Thirdly, water will always diffuse out through the stoma in transpiration, especially on hot days. The water will diffuse out from the cells, it will evaporate, and it will diffuse out of through the stoma into the atmosphere. This has many purposes because transpiration helps to cool the plant, firstly, to cool the plant, and secondly, it will produce a force called the transpirational pull, which will draw water up from the roots to the stem and the leaves. And then the water can be used for various purposes, and mineral ions can be transported up the xylem too. Okay, water can be used for photosynthesis and also to maintain the turgidity of the cells so that the plant gets support and can stand upright. Thirdly, each stoma is surrounded by a pair of guard cells, as we can see here. So this center part is the pore or the stoma, through which the carbon dioxide can diffuse in. And these two are the guard cells. We'll be studying how they open and close a stoma. So guard cells can change their shape through turgidity of the cells to open and close the stoma. Let's find out more about the guard cells. To study the mechanism of the opening of the stoma, we have to study the structure of the guard cells first. So here you see a pair of guard cells that surrounds the stoma or stomatal pore. So guard cells regulate the opening and closing of the stoma. They are very different from the other epidermal cells. Guard cells are actually specialized epidermal cells. So how are they different from the normal epidermal cells surrounding them? For one thing, the shape is really different because guard cells have a bean shape or kidney shape. whereas the other epidermal cells do not. Secondly, gut cells have a lot of chloroplasts so that they can carry out photosynthesis, but normal epidermal cells do not have that. Thirdly, gut cells have a thinner elastic outer wall here and a thicker, less elastic inner wall. This will help them to open the stomatal pore when they are turgid. So we explain that later. But normal epidermal cells do not have different thickness of cell wall. Okay, the cell wall is all uniformly the same, of the same thickness. Right, so if we are going to label this diagram, we have to know these are the epidermal cells here surrounding the gut cell. So these two are gut cells, they are bean shaped. Then this outer wall is the thinner elastic outer wall, the cell wall. And the inner wall near to the stoma are thicker, less elastic inner walls here, thicker than the one outside. Then there's the cytoplasm, chloroplast, nucleus, vacuole, and lastly the stomatal pore or stoma is in the center here. Let us now discuss the mechanism of the opening of the stoma by the gut cells. So you can compare the gut cells to the lift doors, the elevator doors. When the lift arrives at a certain floor and the lift doors open, the two doors will open, one to the left and one to the right. And then you will see the doorway and the people will be able to come out. So likewise, when these gut cells are exposed to sunlight, slowly the gut cells will be drawn outward to the left and one to the right. One to the left and one to the right. In this way, it will open the stoma here. Okay, and then the plant will be connected to the atmosphere so that carbon dioxide can diffuse into the leaf for photosynthesis and water can diffuse out through transpiration. Right, so let's discuss the series of events that cause the gut cells to open the stoma. It all begins with the light shining on the plant and on the leaves and on the gut cells. So when light shines on the leaf, it will trigger the whole series of events that leads to the opening of the stoma. So when light shines on the leaf, it's absorbed by the chloroplasts in the leaf. Chloroplasts will carry out photosynthesis and produce the glucose as a product. Okay, so through photosynthesis, glucose is produced. Glucose is a dissolved substance, it's a solute, so it will increase the osmotic pressure in the gut cells. Apart from that, potassium ions are actively transported from the other epidermal cells into the leaf with the use of energy. So the production of glucose and the active transport of potassium ions into the gut cells both help to increase the osmotic pressure in the gut cells. When the osmotic pressure in the gut cells is higher than the epidermal cells outside, this will create a concentration gradient. There will be higher concentration of water in the epidermal cells than in the gut cells, because gut cells have higher concentration of solutes and lower concentration of water compared to the epidermal cells. Thus, water will diffuse in from region of higher concentration, that means in the epidermal cells, to region of lower concentration of water in the cells by osmosis. So water diffuses in by osmosis because of the higher osmotic pressure in the gut cells compared to the epidermal cells. As water diffuses in, the gut cells will gain water and then become turgid. They'll be swollen and turgid. Then this will affect the cell walls. So there are two cell walls. The thinner elastic wall is on the outside, and the thicker, less elastic wall is on the inside here. So imagine that the vacuole is pressing on the two walls. It is not able to push this thicker wall towards the stoma, okay, because it's thick, but it's able to push this thinner elastic outer wall outwards, and this wall will curve out more, okay, and then it will pull the inner wall together with it to move outwards. Same with this side, the thinner elastic outer wall will be pushed outwards, so the cell will curve outwards, and this thicker, less elastic inner wall will also follow, right? So the gut cells will curve outwards. That is the overall effect, and then it will open the stoma because the force is going to the outward, to the left, and also to the right. So the stoma will become bigger and bigger as the gut cells become more turgid and curve outwards. We have discussed the mechanism of stomatal opening. Here we'll just go through the points again. It's especially important for essay questions and also even for structured questions. Certain concepts here may be tested. We need to know this when we talk about the rate of transpiration too. Okay, so let's begin. Now during the day in sunlight, chloroplasts in gut cells absorb the sunlight and carry out photosynthesis. Glucose is produced in the cells through photosynthesis. Next, the osmotic pressure of the gut cells increases because glucose dissolves in the cell sap and cytoplasm. Potassium ions are also actively transported into the gut cells from the other epidermal cells, and all this serves to increase the osmotic pressure in the gut cells. So when the osmotic pressure in gut cells is higher than that of other cells, higher than that of epidermal cells surrounding it, water will enter the gut cells by osmosis from the normal epidermal cells. Next, the gut cells swell and become turgid. Thinner elastic outer wall of gut cells will curve more than the thicker, less elastic inner wall. So, as we can see from the picture here, the gut cells will curve outwards, one to the left and one to the right. So overall they will curve outwards. Next, the two gut cells curve outward and the stoma opens in the center. So when the stoma opens, what are the substances that can move through the stoma? Carbon dioxide will diffuse into the leaf for photosynthesis, and that's why when light shines on the gut cells, they start to photosynthesize. It is so that the carbon dioxide can diffuse into the leaf through the stoma that's opened, and so that the plant can carry out photosynthesis. Next, water will diffuse out of the leaf through transpiration, so that transpiration can take place and all the benefits of transpiration can be experienced by the plant. For example, when water evaporates and diffuses out of the leaf, it will cool the plant. And it will also produce a force called the transpirational pull that will pull the water up from the roots to the stem and to the leaves in the transport of water and mineral ions. Next, let's talk about the mechanism of stomatal closing. It's just the opposite of mechanism of stomatal opening. So it happens at night when there's no light. How do the stomata close? So at night, photosynthesis does not occur. So there's no production of glucose, and potassium ions move out of the gut cells instead. So everything is going out, okay? So potassium ions go out and there's no glucose produced. Therefore, the osmotic pressure of the gut cells will decrease. And when it happens, water will diffuse out of the gut cells by osmosis. So the cells will become flaccid, they lack water, and they become a bit soft. Then the walls again act. The inner wall will go back to its original position, and the outer wall will not be curved out so much. So in the end, this stoma will close. So the gut cells must become flaccid as a change in the shape. They are not so curved outwards, and this will close the stomata. So notice that it's the osmotic pressure that must decrease, and water must diffuse out the gut cells to make them flaccid. Only then stomata will close. Let's look at an excellent memory aid that I have created to help you remember the events that occur in the mechanism of stomatal opening. Lip gloss got stopper. Lip, Li is for light and P is for photosynthesis. So when the light shines on the gut cells, the chloroplasts in the gut cells will carry out photosynthesis. Gl for glucose and Os for osmosis and also osmotic pressure. Okay, so when the chloroplasts carry out photosynthesis, they will produce glucose, and also potassium ions will be actively transported into the cells. Okay, not mentioned here. So the concentration of glucose will increase, and this will cause water to diffuse into the gut cells by osmosis due to the increasing osmotic pressure. Okay, so OS stands for osmosis and increasing osmotic pressure that will cause osmosis to occur, and water diffuses into the gut cells by osmosis. So GOT, G for gut cells and T for turgid. So the gut cells will gain water and become turgid or swollen up. Then they will curve outwards. The walls will curve outwards. So ST is for stoma or stomata, OP is for open. So this will cause the stoma to open. Okay, so imagine lip gloss got stopper. Maybe somebody lost the cover to the lip gloss, right? So person put a stopper there instead to prevent the lip gloss from drying out. So this is a good memory aid, and I suggest that you write it on a piece of paper, write it in big letters like this with all the meanings, and then review it constantly as every day as you are moving around the house, and also when you have your revision. And after some time, you'll be able to use this memory aid very efficiently and recall it to be used for your essay answers or structured question answers. Let's discuss a forecast question for the exams, which has not been asked before. Explain the adaptations of cell D for its function. 5 marks. So cell D is obviously the gut cell here. Now the tips for getting a higher score. First, identify the cell, then state the general function of that cell, the gut cells, and then followed by the characteristics, specific characteristics, and what specific function do they serve. So assume this is an essay question, right? So you can write as long as you want for essay questions. There's no limit. So let's see how many points we can write here. Try to write more than 5 points. Cell D is a gut cell. 1 mark there. The main function of cell D is to control the opening and closing of the stoma to regulate transpiration. Another mark for the main function. The asterisk here shows you the marks that are given, right? 1 mark for 1 asterisk. They open the stoma to allow carbon dioxide to diffuse into the leaf for photosynthesis. This is another main function. You may get 2 marks or maybe only 1 mark, either one may be chosen. So always write a little bit more because you may be wrong. If one is wrong, at least there's another one that may be correct and may be able to help you obtain that mark. Cell D is bean shaped and it has a thicker, less elastic inner wall and a thinner, more elastic outer wall, so that the cell can curve outwards to open the stoma when the cell is turgid in sunlight. So notice that I have stated the characteristic: thicker, less elastic inner wall, thinner, more elastic outer wall, followed by the function, so that the cell wall and the gut cell itself can curve outwards to open the stoma when the cell is turgid. Okay, characteristic plus function. Next, again another characteristic plus the function. Cell D contains a lot of chloroplasts. That's the characteristic. Function: to carry out photosynthesis in sunlight. Alright, and if you have more marks given for this section, if there are more marks given, you can continue to mention that from photosynthesis a lot of glucose is produced that will increase the osmotic pressure of cell D. And then water will diffuse in by osmosis, causing the cell D to become turgid, and that leads to the opening of the stoma in the light. Let's look at another question that may be asked in the exam, a HOTS question. State 3 differences between the gut cells at stage X and Y. So this table may already be drawn for you for the structured question. If so, you can fill in the table. But if it is not drawn for you in the structured question, please do not go and draw a table. For structured question, if no table is drawn, just blanks for you to fill up, then you have to mention the differences in words. For example, the gut cells are turgid in stage X, but the gut cells are flaccid in stage Y. That is, if no table is given in the structured question, and assuming this is a structured question. Okay? Don't draw the table yourself for structured question. But if it comes on the essay, you can draw your table. And table is the best way to compare the differences. Right, so this is stage X here and stage Y over this side. So the first difference is when we see the stoma opened, is because the gut cells are turgid for X. And for Y, when the stoma is closed, it means that the gut cells are flaccid. So that's the first difference. Second difference is that for X, the gut cells curve outwards, curved out, whereas for stage Y, gut cells do not curve outwards. There's less curvature here. Now, for X, gut cells curve outwards so that the stoma is opened and happens in the daytime. For Y, gut cells do not curve outwards, so the stoma is closed here, and this occurs in the night. Lastly, the content inside the gut cells. Glucose is produced in the gut cells in X because when it's open, it means that the light was shining on it. That's how it could open. So if the light's shining on it, that means glucose was produced. And the osmotic pressure in the cells increases due to the dissolved glucose. However, for Y, glucose was not produced because this is at night and there's no sunlight. So the osmotic pressure in the cells decreases or is less than for X. Okay, so these are the 3 differences that you can write, where you have to know the mechanism of stomatal opening and closing first in order to compare the 2 cells.